The year was 2487, and humanity had just passed a monumental milestone. After centuries of exploration, Earth had finally developed the technology to traverse the vast expanse of the galaxy at faster-than-light speeds. With this new capability, the United Earth Government, UEG, had ambitious plans to unite the galaxy under one banner, the Banner of Earth. The UEG starships, sleek and powerful, were no longer just symbols of exploration, they were symbols of Earth's rising dominance. The galaxy, which had long been a diverse, fractured collection of alien species and civilizations, was about to witness a major shift in power. It all began with the formation of the Galactic Crusade, a massive campaign to spread Earth's influence, forge alliances, and, when necessary, bring the galaxy to heel. The first mission of this crusade was to visit and establish a presence in the heart of the Cygni sector, a star system with dozens of alien species. Many of these species had either refused or rejected Earth's overtures in the past, considering humanity to be little more than an emerging species among countless others. But this new era of technological prowess meant the game was changing. The United Earth Fleet, led by Admiral Sloan Hartwell, a seasoned war strategist and politician, was ready to prove that Earth would not be ignored any longer. Admiral Hartwell sat at the helm of the Eternal Dawn, the flagship of the Crusade, as it drifted toward the Cygni system. Around her, a fleet of warships, cargo vessels, and diplomatic ships followed in perfect formation. The mission was clear: secure the Cygni system, present Earth's peaceful intentions, and if peace wasn't an option, secure dominance through force. The Galactic Crusade was to be a blend of diplomacy and military might, with the future of humanity resting on a knife's edge. "I'll be honest with you, Captain," Hartwell said, her voice steady but betraying the faintest edge of tension. "This is a gamble. The Cygni species are known for their pride. They will not be easily swayed." Captain Liam Graves, a young but brilliant officer, nodded. "We can't afford failure, Admiral. If we can't establish a foothold here, it could embolden the other alien factions to defy us." The Admiral's gaze hardened. "Then we make sure that doesn't happen. Earth's destiny is not negotiable." As the fleet approached the first planet in the Cygni system, the Eternal Dawn intercepted a communication from the dominant species in the region, the Solarian Dominion, a reptilian race known for their intelligence, strength, and, most of all, their mistrust of humanity. The Solarian Prime spoke, his voice calm but with a noticeable undercurrent of disdain. "You are trespassing in Solarian space, Admiral Hartwell," the Prime stated, his image appearing on the holographic communication panel. "Earth's presence is not welcome here. Leave at once, or face the consequences." Hartwell's lips curled into a faint smile. She had expected this response, but she wasn't one to back down. "We come in peace, Solarian Prime," she said, her voice measured. "But if you would prefer to test the resolve of Earth's fleet, we are more than ready for that." The Solarian Prime's gaze darkened. "Your species lacks the wisdom to understand the consequences of your actions, Admiral. We have faced your kind before, and we have crushed them." "We are not like the others," Hartwell responded. "You will find that humanity is a different kind of challenge." A tense silence filled the comms. The stakes had been set. Earth was no longer just a distant, primitive species, it had arrived. The Solarian Prime knew this, and he understood that this time, things would not unfold as they had before. But Hartwell was far from naive. She knew that the first step of the crusade was never going to be easy. In the distance, the massive fleet of Solarian warships loomed like a shadow. The Eternal Dawn's sensors detected the telltale signs of heavily armed ships preparing for conflict. But this wasn't just a military mission, it was a statement. The Solarian Dominion, and every other alien empire, would understand one thing: humanity had come to stay. Whether by force or diplomacy, Earth's reach would extend across the stars. The countdown to the next stage of the crusade began as Admiral Hartwell turned to her crew. The time for hesitation was over. The stars would bend to Earth's will, or they would burn. Admiral Hartwell stood at the command center of the Eternal Dawn, the ship vibrating slightly as its engines hummed with power. The tension in the air was palpable, every officer and crew member focused on their respective stations. The Solarian fleet had not backed down. In fact, their ships had begun moving into formation, a clear sign they were preparing for battle. "We're not backing out, are we?" Captain Liam Graves asked quietly, though he already knew the answer. Hartwell turned to face him, her eyes sharp with determination. "No, Captain. Our mission is too important. We've come too far for retreat to be an option." The Solarian Prime's warning echoed in her mind, but it was drowned out by the confidence in her own heart. She had prepared for this, and though diplomacy would always be the preferred route, Earth's forces were ready to show their strength. The time for talking was over. Now it was time to prove to the galaxy that humanity wasn't just a species to be underestimated. The Solarian fleet, numbering in the dozens of ships, was formidable. Their advanced weaponry, coupled with their strategic minds, made them a dangerous adversary. However, Earth had something they didn't: unity, innovation, and sheer determination. The Eternal Dawn alone was capable of turning the tide of the battle, and the fleet's firepower and tactics had been refined through years of preparation. The first volley of plasma fire from the Solarian ships lit up the dark void of space, streaking toward the Eternal Dawn. The ship's shields flared to life, absorbing the incoming blast. The crew braced as the impact sent a tremor through the hull, but they held firm. "Shields holding at 85%, reported Lieutenant Vic, a young but capable officer at the tactical station. "Return fire ready, Admiral." Hartwell nodded. "Fire at will. Target their flagship. Let them know Earth's not here to play games." The Eternal Dawn's weapons systems roared to life, unleashing a barrage of advanced railguns and plasma torpedoes. The Solarian flagship, a massive ship adorned with sharp, jagged edges, took the brunt of the attack. A ripple of energy spread across its hull as the projectile struck, and the ship faltered, its shields flickering. "Direct hit," Lieutenant Vic reported. "Their shields are down to 50%. But the Solarian fleet wasn't retreating. Instead, they retaliated with a coordinated strike that threatened to overwhelm Earth's defenses. A massive wave of firepower came crashing toward the Eternal Dawn, and the ship's crew scrambled to respond. "Deploy defensive drones," Hartwell barked. "Activate the graviton disruptors. We need to disrupt their formations." The Eternal Dawn's drone bays opened, releasing hundreds of small, agile craft that buzzed through space, intercepting incoming fire and drawing enemy attention away from the flagship. Meanwhile, the graviton disruptors, advanced technology developed by Earth's engineers, created temporary ripples in spacetime, causing enemy projectiles to veer off course and enemy ships to lose their precise targeting systems. For a moment, it seemed like Earth might be gaining the upper hand. The Solarian fleet, which had once seemed insurmountable, was beginning to falter under the pressure of Earth's superior tactics and technology. But just as the tide began to shift in Earth's favor, the Solarian Prime made his move. A massive ship, a Warlord-class dreadnought, emerged from the rear of their formation. Its weapons systems were far more advanced than anything Earth had ever encountered, a terrifying display of power. The dreadnought's main cannon charged with a bright, deadly light. Before Hartwell could give the order to evade, a beam of pure energy shot out, cutting through space like a knife through silk. The blast slammed into the Eternal Dawn's port side, throwing the ship violently off course. Sparks flew from consoles, and the hull groaned under the strain. "We've lost power to the port side," Lieutenant Vic reported, panic creeping into his voice. "Shields are down to 30%. We're vulnerable." Hartwell clenched her fists, her mind racing. This was the moment that could define the entire campaign. Earth's resolve was being tested in the fires of combat, and there was no room for doubt. "Activate the pulse cannons," Hartwell ordered, her voice cold and determined. "We have one shot at this." The Eternal Dawn's pulse cannons, powerful, cutting-edge weapons that could release concentrated bursts of energy, charged up, their blue glow filling the command deck. With a steady hand, Hartwell aimed the weapon at the Solarian dreadnought. Fire! The pulse cannons discharged with a deafening roar, sending out waves of energy so intense that they seemed to distort space itself. The shot struck the dreadnought's shield, and the resulting explosion lit up the dark expanse like a star-going supernova. The Solarian ship, already weakened from previous hits, was torn apart, its massive hull splitting into pieces. The Solarian fleet hesitated, their morale shattered by the destruction of their most powerful vessel. For the first time, they seemed unsure of their next move. Admiral Hartwell knew that this victory, though significant, was just the beginning. The Galactic Crusade would be a long and grueling campaign. But in this moment, humanity had proven one thing to the galaxy: Earth's influence could not be ignored. And now, the true work was about to begin. The battle for the Cygni system had been a resounding success, but Admiral Hartwell knew better than to rest on her laurels. The Solarian Dominion, though temporarily shaken by the loss of their flagship, was far from defeated. The shockwave from their dreadnought's destruction had reverberated through the Cygni sector, sending ripples of fear and uncertainty through the galaxy's power structures. The Solarian Prime, nursing his wounded pride, retreated to his capital world, Vaxor, where he called for a council of war. The Solarian military had lost a significant chunk of its strength, but the Dominion was not just a military powerhouse, it was a political one. The fate of the galaxy rested not only on the battlefield but also on the intricate web of alliances and diplomacy that could sway entire species. Hartwell's next move was critical. The Solarian response would likely determine the outcome of the next phase of the Crusade, and Earth's reputation had been both solidified and tested. The Galactic Council, a loose confederation of neutral and allied species, was already in motion, discussing the implications of humanity's military intervention. Many of the smaller species saw Earth as a beacon of hope, a chance to break free from the dominance of larger, more oppressive empires. Others, however, viewed humanity's sudden rise with skepticism and fear. Captain Graves stood by Hartwell's side as she reviewed the latest intelligence reports. On a holographic map of the galaxy, the red outline of the Solarian Dominion loomed over the Cygni sector, a constant reminder of the looming threat. The reports also indicated that various smaller factions, previously neutral, were beginning to align themselves with Earth, many eager for trade deals and defense pacts, others seeing an opportunity to topple long-standing empires like the Slythar Combine or the Ugrax Coalition. "Admiral," Graves said, breaking the silence. "The Solarian Prime has requested a diplomatic meeting. They're offering a ceasefire, but the terms seem unrealistic." Hartwell narrowed her eyes, her expression one of careful contemplation. "Unrealistic how?" "From what we've gathered, the Solarian are asking for complete withdrawal from the Cygni system in exchange for an armistice. They want us to leave their domain and recognize their sovereignty. If we accept, they promise no further attacks, for now." Hartwell's lip curled in distaste. "That's not peace. That's a submission. They want us to turn tail and leave with our tails between our legs." Graves shook his head, knowing she was right. "It's a trap. They're regrouping, waiting for their moment to strike again." "Then we don't give them that moment," Hartwell said, her voice resolute. "We take the fight to them." As she gave the order to continue preparations for a military offensive, her mind was already turning to the larger picture. Earth had proven its strength in battle, but Hartwell knew that true victory would come not through war alone but through alliances. The next phase of the crusade would need to be far more strategic. Earth couldn't afford to be seen as an empire built solely on military might. There would need to be diplomacy, too. But in the back of her mind, a nagging question lingered: what if the Solarian Dominion wasn't the only threat humanity faced? What if there were other, more dangerous forces waiting in the wings, watching Earth's every move? With the Solarian ceasefire offer lingering in her thoughts, Hartwell called for a council meeting with her senior staff. The map of the Cygni system flickered to life before her, and a holographic projection of Captain Graves, Lieutenant Vick, and several other officers appeared. "All right, everyone," Hartwell began, her voice steady. "We've won the battle, but we need to prepare for the war. The Solarian Dominion will regroup. They've been humiliated, and their pride won't let that stand for long. We need to either secure their loyalty or crush them entirely." And we need to do so before other factions catch wind of our weakness. Admiral, if I may, Lieutenant Vic interjected. What if we offer the Solarian Dominion a trade agreement instead? Something that appeals to their hunger for control, while offering them an out without compromising our position? Hartwell raised an eyebrow. Explain. We could propose a defensive pact, Earth and the Solarian Dominion working together to secure the border of their sector and ours, Vic suggested. We provide military support, and in return, they offer us safe passage and access to vital trade routes and resources. It would make them allies, not enemies, and we'd be able to focus on the larger picture. Graves shook his head. That might work with smaller factions, but the Solarian are too proud to accept something so symbiotic. They'll see it as an insult. We can't risk losing face by appearing weak. Hartwell thought carefully, her eyes scanning the faces of her officers. The Solarian had a point. Earth couldn't afford to come across as a fledgling empire looking to appease others. But offering an olive branch could also work in their favor if it showed that Earth was not a warmongering power, but one that understood the delicate balance of galactic politics. The decision weighed heavily on her mind. Could Earth afford to risk another fight, or was this their chance to solidify their position and avoid a protracted war? She stood from her chair, her gaze firm as she addressed her crew. We will take the diplomatic route first. But we will not compromise on our principles. The Solarian Prime must understand that Earth will not back down, not for him, not for anyone. Prepare the fleet for a final push into Solarian space, but keep diplomatic channels open. If they want to negotiate, they will do it on our terms. As the meeting concluded and her crew dispersed, Hartwell felt a strange calm settle over her. The crusade was far from over. The universe was vast and filled with unknowns, but one thing was certain, Earth had already proven it would not be ignored. Admiral Hartwell paced the command deck of the Eternal Dawn, her mind racing with strategy and possibility. The diplomatic channels had been established, and word had come from the Solarian Dominion that they were willing to meet under specific terms. But Hartwell knew this was more than just a diplomatic exchange, it was a gamble. If the Solarian Prime were to accept Earth's terms for peace and alliance, it would shift the balance of power in the galaxy. Earth would have a foothold in one of the most influential sectors. But if the negotiations failed, the battle for the Cygni system would resume, with even greater consequences. As the Eternal Dawn approached the Solarian capital of Vaxxor, a planet surrounded by massive defensive stations and heavily fortified structures, the tension among the crew was palpable. Despite their victory in the first engagement, Earth had yet to prove it could maintain long-term stability in the face of more determined resistance. Admiral, Captain Graves said, his voice carrying a note of concern as he approached Hartwell's side, do you truly believe the Solarian will honor any kind of peace agreement after everything that's happened? They've lost too much face. Hartwell didn't break her stride. I don't trust them completely, Captain, but we have to offer the chance. We can't afford to act like conquerors. Earth's future is about influence, not domination. We must show the galaxy that we're capable of more than just warfare. Graves nodded, but his face remained tense. Understood. But let's be clear, if they pull any tricks, we'll be ready to deal with it. Absolutely, Hartwell agreed. We've prepared for every contingency. The Eternal Dawn descended into the atmosphere of Vaxxor, its hull shimmering in the light of the planet's twin suns. The Solarian fleet hovered above the surface, ready to react at a moment's notice. But surprisingly, the air remained tense yet expectant. A sleek Solarian diplomatic ship, its dark, angular form gliding silently through the sky, approached the Eternal Dawn. Its descent was slow, deliberate, much like the way the Solarians saw themselves. The atmosphere inside the ship was calm, but everyone aboard knew this moment was far from routine. Hartwell and her senior staff gathered in the diplomacy room, a place equipped with holographic projectors and communication links, awaiting the arrival of the Solarian delegation. The room was spacious, almost clinical in its design, meant to convey authority and control rather than comfort. But Hartwell had no illusions, the space was just as much about power dynamics as it was about discussion. The Solarian Prime, a towering figure with emerald scales and piercing yellow eyes, appeared before them on a holovid screen. His expression was one of calm authority, but there was an edge to his gaze that spoke of deep calculation. "Admiral Hartwell," the Solarian Prime's voice resonated through the room, "I trust you've come to understand the consequences of defying the Dominion. What is it that you seek in these negotiations?" Hartwell met his gaze, unwavering. "We seek peace, Solarian Prime. But not under the terms you've dictated. Earth offers you a strategic partnership, a mutual defense agreement that secures both our interests in the Cygni system and the surrounding sectors." The Solarian Prime's eyes narrowed. "A partnership? You misunderstand, Admiral. The Solarian Dominion does not share power, it dominates. You will leave our space, or we will make your departure unpleasant." There it was, the threat. Hartwell had expected it, but hearing it out loud still carried weight. The Solarian Prime was playing his hand, trying to reassert his dominance after the losses of the past few weeks. "I'm offering you something more than just peace," Hartwell continued, her voice steady. "I'm offering you the chance to be part of something greater, Earth's rising influence across the galaxy. We are a growing power, and we don't expect you to bow to us. But we do expect cooperation. Together, we can create a stable, prosperous region in the galaxy, something that benefits us both." There was a long pause as the Solarian Prime mulled over her words. Hartwell's heart raced, but she kept her posture firm, not showing any sign of doubt. This was a gamble, but it was the only way forward. If they were to succeed in their crusade, Earth had to prove it could play the diplomatic game, even with the fiercest of foes. The Solarian Prime let out a low, rumbling laugh, one that seemed to reverberate through the room like a warning. "You speak as though I have a choice, Admiral. Earth is not the only power in this galaxy. You may have won a battle, but wars are fought with more than just weapons." Hartwell's gaze hardened. "And what if we were to win the war, Solarian Prime? Would that be the lesson you want to teach the galaxy?" The Prime's smile faltered, if only for a moment, before he regained his composure. "You overestimate your position, Admiral. You have power, but not the kind you think. The Galactic Council is already in motion, and there are those who will never accept Earth's rise. Then they'll have to face the consequences, just as you will if you don't cooperate," Hartwell said firmly. For a moment, the tension in the room seemed to thicken, until the Solarian Prime finally broke the silence. "We will consider your proposal, Admiral Hartwell. But know this, the Solarian Dominion does not forget slights. If Earth's influence encroaches too far into our domain, there will be repercussions." Hartwell didn't flinch. "I understand. And we will be ready for whatever comes next." The transmission ended, and the room fell into a heavy silence. The crew exchanged uncertain glances. Had the negotiation succeeded? Or had they only bought time? "Admiral, what do we do now?" Captain Graves asked, his voice low. "We wait," Hartwell replied, her voice calm but resolute. "We wait, and we see if the Solarian choose peace or war." The atmosphere aboard the Eternal Dawn grew thick with anticipation in the days that followed the diplomatic meeting with the Solarian Dominion. Despite their promise to consider Earth's proposal, no word came from Baxter. The silence was deafening. And with each passing hour, the crew felt the weight of uncertainty growing heavier. Had they overestimated their leverage? Was the Solarian Prime merely toying with them, or was something darker at play? Admiral Hartwell stood before the galaxy map once more, her fingers lightly tracing the path of their fleet's movement across the stars. The Cygni system, their most recent victory, now felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the looming question: would the Solarian respond, or would they be drawn into another bloody confrontation? "Admiral," Captain Graves spoke, breaking her concentration. "We've intercepted several encrypted transmissions from the Solarian capital. They seem urgent. I think it's time we find out what's really going on over there." Hartwell turned to face him. "What do you mean? Could they be preparing for another attack?" "I don't know, but it's possible." "We can't take any chances," Graves replied, his voice steady but filled with tension. The encryption is tight, but we've been able to decrypt part of the message. It's about the Solarian Prime. Something's wrong. What kind of wrong are we talking about? The Prime hasn't been seen for days, Admiral. His inner circle is in disarray. There are reports of a coup. Hartwell's eyes narrowed. A coup? Yes, Graves confirmed, his expression serious. It appears there's a faction within the Solarian Dominion that's unhappy with the Prime's leadership, especially after the battle for Signy. There's a power struggle brewing, and the faction that's rising seems more militant. They're not interested in peace, they want vengeance. A flicker of realization passed through Hartwell's mind. The Solarians' promise to consider the peace proposal had been nothing more than a stalling tactic, buying time for the Prime's enemies to organize. Now, with the Solarian Dominion on the brink of internal collapse, the balance of power was shifting. Are they preparing to attack? She asked, her voice sharp. It's possible. We're seeing increased military activity in Solarian space. But it's all very fragmented. If the Dominion fractures, they might turn on each other, or they could lash out at us in an attempt to unite their forces, Graves explained. Hartwell nodded. We need to be ready for anything. I'll gather the senior staff. We need to discuss our options. The senior staff gathered in the command center soon after. Lieutenant Vic, tactical officer and strategist, presented a projection of Solarian space, outlining the various factions that had sprung up in the wake of the Prime's weakening power. Some were isolated, focused on small-scale military victories. Others, however, had the potential to unite the fractured Solarian forces under their banner, and those were the ones Hartwell needed to worry about. We have two immediate options, Vic said, his voice steady. First, we could move to secure the Signy system and defend it against any Solarian incursions, whether from the current government or a splinter faction. This would solidify our position in the region and send a strong message. Alternatively, we could take a more subtle approach, send out covert operations to gather more intelligence on the factions involved in the coup. If we know who's truly in charge, we can determine the most strategic response. Hartwell leaned back in her chair, considering the options. Both were viable, but each came with risks. A show of force might solidify Earth's presence in the galaxy, but it could also lead to an escalation of hostilities. A covert approach, on the other hand, would give them more time to understand the situation but could leave Earth vulnerable if the Solarian civil war escalated quickly. What about the possibility of an alliance with one of the factions? Captain Graves interjected, his voice calm but thoughtful. If we can strike a deal with one of the more moderate factions, we might be able to secure the Signy system without further bloodshed. Hartwell turned to Graves, her mind running through the various scenarios. She considered the proposition carefully. It was an intriguing idea. Earth could potentially avoid a costly war if they aligned themselves with a faction that could stabilize the region. But alliances in times of chaos were fraught with uncertainty. If we can find a faction that's truly interested in peace, that might be our best bet, Hartwell said. But if we can't, we'll need to be prepared to fight. The crew worked through the night, analyzing every piece of intelligence they had on the Solarian Dominion's internal conflict. The Solarian Prime's enemies were many, and they were becoming bolder by the hour. But there was one faction that stood out, a group of high-ranking military officers who had been openly critical of the Prime's leadership. They were demanding a more aggressive response to Earth's rise, and their supporters were growing in number. They're not interested in peace, Vic concluded, after hours of analysis. If they gain control, they'll make a run at Signy and any other system they can conquer. So it's a full-scale war then, Hartwell said, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Prepare the fleet. We're going to secure the Signy system. We'll make sure the Solarian know that Earth isn't backing down. The decision was made, and within hours, the Eternal Dawn and its fleet began to move. The galaxy had just entered a new phase of the Crusade, and the Solarian Civil War was now a battleground. For Earth, this was no longer just a matter of expanding influence. It was a matter of survival. But as they moved into position, Hartwell couldn't shake the feeling that something even darker loomed just beyond the stars. The Solarian were not the only ones watching, and Earth's rise would not go unnoticed by the other powers of the galaxy. The void of space was vast, and it held more than just stars. The Eternal Dawn and its fleet approached the Cygni system, the vastness of space stretching before them like a foreboding sea. Despite the resolution of their orders, Admiral Hartwell couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that lingered in the air. The Solarian Civil War was no longer an internal matter, it was becoming a galaxy-wide conflict, with the factions vying for control of their empire threatening the fragile peace that humanity had fought so hard to establish. As they entered the system, the unmistakable signals of the Solarian military fleet came into view. They were not moving with the disciplined precision Hartwell had expected from a unified force. Instead, the fleet was splintered, with several rogue factions operating independently. The signs of internal chaos were clear, but so too was the growing threat they posed to Earth's newly secured territory. "Admiral, we've detected multiple Solarian warships entering the Cygni system," Captain Graves reported, his voice cool but laden with urgency. "It looks like the faction led by General Kaler, the most aggressive of the contenders, is trying to take control of the system. Their forces are disorganized, but there are enough ships to pose a significant threat." Hartwell's eyes hardened. She had anticipated this kind of move, but seeing it unfold in real time made the danger all the more tangible. General Kaler's faction was known for its brutal tactics and its desire for revenge against humanity. The stakes were higher now. If Kaler and his supporters were allowed to seize the Cygni system, it would send a message to the entire galaxy that Earth was vulnerable. "Prepare for battle," Hartwell ordered, her voice decisive. "We cannot allow the Solarian to destabilize this system any further. If Kaler gains control of Cygni, Earth's influence will be threatened." As the fleet moved into formation, the tension on the Eternal Dawn reached a boiling point. Officers scrambled to their stations, checking weapons systems and ensuring that shields were fully powered. In the midst of this, Lieutenant Vick approached Hartwell with an urgent report. "Admiral, there's something strange," he said. "We've detected an anomaly, an uncharted fleet, moving toward the Cygni system from a nearby sector. It's too far out to be a Solarian faction. We believe it's a third-party force." Hartwell's brow furrowed. "A third party? Are they hostile?" "We don't know yet," Vic replied. "They haven't made any aggressive moves, but they're too large to ignore. I recommend we send a small reconnaissance team to assess the situation." Hartwell's mind raced. A third-party fleet in the middle of a Solarian civil war was more than just a nuisance. It could be a force sent by another galactic power, someone who saw the instability in the Solarian Dominion as an opportunity to expand their own influence. "Agreed," Hartwell said. "Prepare a recon team. I want answers before we engage Kaler's forces. If there's an unknown factor in play, we need to be ready for anything." As the Eternal Dawn continued its advance, a small fleet of scout ships was dispatched to investigate the incoming third-party fleet. The minutes stretched into hours, each one feeling heavier as the uncertainty continued to build. Finally, the scout ships returned with alarming news. "Admiral," Captain Graves said, his voice tight with apprehension. "The third-party fleet, it's a coalition of several species. But most troubling of all, they're led by a faction known as the Ixar Collective." Hartwell's stomach dropped at the mention of the Ixar. The Collective was a shadowy organization known for its ruthless tactics, often operating in the margins of galactic politics. No one knew their true motives or their origin, but their reputation for destabilizing regions and sowing chaos was well known. "Are they aligned with any of the Solarian factions?" Hartwell asked, her voice calm but filled with intensity. "Not directly, but their leader, Zarn, has been known to broker deals with power-hungry empires. He's been quietly undermining several galactic governments to increase his own influence. If he's involved, we could be facing more than just a Solarian civil war. This could turn into a much larger conflict," Graves replied. Hartwell gritted her teeth, her mind racing through the possibilities. The Ixar Collective could tip the balance in favor of one of the Solarian factions, or worse, they could use the chaos to claim the Cygni system for themselves. Earth's expansion was at risk, again. Prepare for a multi-front engagement, Hartwell commanded. We'll continue to engage Kaler's forces, but we need to keep an eye on the Ixar Collective. We can't allow them to manipulate this war to their advantage. With the fleet now split between two pressing threats, the battle for Cygni began in earnest. Earth's ships, though vastly outnumbered by the Solarian warships, used their superior tactics and cohesion to push back Kaler's forces. It was a grueling fight, missile barrages and energy blasts filling the void of space as the two sides clashed. But as Hartwell had predicted, the Ixar Collective's ships began to close in, their dark, sleek vessels appearing like predators in the shadows of the battle. Zarn's forces had arrived, and they had no intention of standing by while Earth fought the Solarian. "Admiral, the Ixar are entering combat range," Vic reported, his voice edged with urgency. "They're positioning themselves between our forces and Kaler's. They're trying to pick off our ships one by one." Hartwell's mind raced. She had to make a choice, and fast. If the Ixar were allowed to destabilize the situation further, Earth's presence in the Cygni system would be in jeopardy. But engaging them could draw Kaler's forces back into the fray, and without their full attention on Earth, the battle for the system could be lost. "We can't afford to ignore them," Hartwell said, her voice filled with resolve. "We engage the Ixar, but we must not lose focus on Kaler. He's the immediate threat." With that, the Eternal Dawn and the fleet split, launching into an aggressive maneuver to disrupt the Ixar Collective's formation. The battle had now escalated into a three-way conflict, with each faction vying for dominance of the Cygni system, and Earth's future hanging in the balance. But Hartwell knew this war was far from over. As Earth fought to secure its place in the stars, the forces of chaos and ambition were already moving in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The battle for the Cygni system raged on, a chaotic maelstrom of fire and steel as Earth's fleet clashed against the Solarian forces led by General Kaler, while the mysterious Ixar Collective lurked in the background, picking off ships and sowing discord. The Eternal Dawn was at the center of it all, her weapons blazing, shields flickering under the onslaught from all sides. Admiral Hartwell stood at the command center, her face a mask of cold resolve as she observed the shifting tide of battle on the holoscreen. The Ixar were proving more resilient than expected, their ships moving with a sinister grace as they flanked Earth's fleet. Their tactics were ruthless, and their numbers were steadily growing as more ships emerged from the darkness of the distant sector. "Admiral," Captain Graves said, his voice tense as he looked over the battlefield. "We've lost several of our frontline ships. The Ixar are starting to target our weaker vessels, our cruisers are taking heavy damage." Hartwell's pulse quickened, but she didn't show it. "We need to draw the Ixar into a trap. Send the remaining cruisers in a flanking maneuver toward Kaler's forces. Force the Ixar to chase them. They'll overextend." Graves hesitated. "Admiral, it's a risky move. If they don't fall for it." "They will," Hartwell cut him off. "They're predictable. They want to isolate and destroy our ships one by one. But they won't pass up the chance to take down a cruiser." As the tactical shift unfolded, the Ixar did indeed take the bait. The Earth cruisers, weakened but determined, launched into a reckless attack against Kaler's forces, drawing the Ixar in pursuit. In that moment of distraction, Earth's flagship, the Eternal Dawn, alongside its remaining battle groups, repositioned, bringing devastating firepower to bear on the Ixar's exposed flank. "We've got them, Admiral," Lieutenant Vic shouted as his screens blinked with new data. "They're falling back. We've inflicted significant damage. They're retreating." Hartwell allowed herself a brief moment of relief, but her attention quickly shifted back to Kaler's forces, who were now fully aware that their main enemy had been reinforced. "We need to finish this," she muttered under her breath, "before the Ixar can regroup." The final push against Kaler's fleet came swiftly. Earth's superior tactics and determination paid off, forcing the rogue general's ships into a retreat. The Cygni system was now secured, but the price had been high. The Eternal Dawn had suffered damage, and several other ships in Earth's fleet had been lost in the chaotic three-way battle. With Kaler's forces withdrawing and the Ixar retreating into the void, Hartwell stood at the command deck, surveying the results of the costly victory. She felt a surge of triumph, but it was tempered by the grim reality of the aftermath. The Cygni system was won, but the war was far from over. "We did it, Admiral," Captain Graves said, his voice quieter now, the weight of the victory sinking in. "We've secured the system. The Solarian will have to reconsider their stance now." "Yes," Hartwell replied, her voice steady, "but the Ixar are still out there. And the Solarian factions will regroup. This war is far from over. We've won a battle, but the crusade for the galaxy is just beginning." As Hartwell walked through the corridors of the Eternal Dawn, her mind buzzed with the consequences of their victory. Earth had won the battle for Cygni, but the war for the galaxy was escalating. Every victory had its cost, and humanity's crusade to spread its influence was entangled in a web of conflict, betrayal, and shifting alliances. She knew that the galaxy was watching, and that Earth's rise was only just beginning. But she also understood that power, true power, came with a price. The cost of war was high, and the cost of peace was often higher still. "I'll be damned if we don't win this," Hartwell muttered to herself, her determination stealing. "The galaxy will bend to Earth's will. And if we have to fight every step of the way, then we'll fight. We'll fight until the stars themselves are ours." But as Hartwell stood at the viewport, staring into the void of space, she couldn't shake the feeling that there were darker forces at work, forces that had been watching and waiting, patiently, for their chance to strike. And if the Ixar were only the first wave of a greater storm, Earth's galactic crusade would demand more than just blood and strategy. It would demand everything.